You know, every app you use, every website you visit, it's all built on a foundation of human choices. Just lines of code written by engineers making decisions. And as we're about to see, some of those choices, well, they can cost billions. We're going to dive into the high cost of code and the massive responsibility that comes with it, starting with a fine so big it literally broke records.
Okay, just look at this number. 1.2 billion euros. And no, that's not revenue. That's a penalty. In May of 2023, this was the record-shattering fine handed to Meta. And for what? For illegally transferring data from European users over to the United States. Now, this wasn't some hacker breaking in. Nope, this was a deliberate architectural choice, a decision written right into the platform's code about how data was supposed to flow. A choice that regulators finally said was flat-out illegal.
And Meta is definitely not alone here. Back in 2021, Amazon got hit with this staggering €746 million fine. And get this, their defense was fascinating. They argued, hey, no data breach occurred. And they were right, technically. But the regulator's point was that their entire targeted advertising system was the problem. The way it tracked customer data without real consent, that was the violation. The issue wasn't a bug in the code, it was the core business model working exactly as designed.
And one more, just to really drive the point home, TikTok got hit with a €530 million fine. The main problem here? The code was written in a way that let engineers in China directly access sensitive data from European users. This really shows one of the biggest challenges we face today. Your data might be sitting on a server in, say, Ireland, but who's actually able to look at it from an office in Beijing? The code itself made something possible that the law said was forbidden.
So, how do these billion-euro mistakes even happen? To figure that out, we're going to first step onto what I'm calling the digital battlefield, just to see the kinds of threats engineers are up against every day. Then, we'll get into the bigger debate. In a world where data is collected constantly, is privacy even a thing anymore? And finally, we'll pull it all together and talk about what it really means to code with a conscience.
All right, so those massive fines we just talked about, they don't happen in a vacuum. They happen out here on the digital battlefield. And to get to the root of it, you have to start with one fundamental truth. The internet was never, ever built to be secure. We have to work from the assumption that the network is hostile and that anything we build has to be designed to defend itself from the ground up.
So, one of the classic threats is the person-in-the-middle attack. Honestly, the best way to picture this is to think of a malicious mail carrier. You send a letter to your bank, right? But this mail carrier grabs it, opens it up, reads your account number, maybe even changes the deposit amount you wrote down, seals it back up, and sends it on its way. You have no idea, the bank has no idea, your communication was totally compromised. That is exactly what can happen online, especially when you connect to some sketchy public Wi-Fi.
And the attacks come in all shapes and sizes. You've got sniffing, for example. It's basically digital wiretapping. If your data isn't encrypted, someone on the same network, like that coffee shop Wi-Fi we just mentioned, can use simple tools to just sniff the data packets flying through the air, reading your emails or messages clear as day. Then you have spoofing, which is all about deception. The classic case is a phishing attack, where a scammer builds a fake login page that looks exactly like your bank's website. You type in your username and password, and bam, they've got them.
I know, this all sounds pretty scary. A constant storm of attacks that seems almost impossible to stop. So, what do we do? How in the world do we fight back? How do engineers build systems that can actually survive out there on the digital battlefield?
Well, the whole defense strategy really boils down to these three core pillars. Let's use your banking app to make it simple. First, you've got authentication. That's you proving you're actually you, maybe with your fingerprint or Face ID. Okay, step one, done. Next up is authorization. Now that the app knows it's you, what are you allowed to do? You're authorized to see your own bank balance, but you're definitely not authorized to see mine. And finally, confidentiality. This is what makes sure that your connection to the bank is encrypted, so no one can pull off that person-in-the-middle attack and listen in.
But here's the thing. Security isn't just about stopping bad guys from breaking in. It's also about the information we willingly give away every single day. And this brings us to a much deeper, more philosophical question that has really defined the internet for the last 20 years.
So let's start with one side of the argument put very bluntly way back in 1999 by the CEO of Sun Microsystems, Scott McNealy. His take was basically this. In a digital world, the whole idea of privacy is just an illusion. Our data is everywhere, it's being collected all the time, and we should just accept it and, well, get over it.
A full decade later, Google's then CEO Eric Schmidt kind of doubled down with this even more controversial idea. This point of view pretty much frames privacy as something that's only necessary for people who have something to hide. It implies that if you're a good person, you should have no problem being transparent, and wanting privacy is suspicious.
But hang on, is that really what privacy is about? This idea isn't new at all. In fact, the legal concept of a right to privacy was being debated all the way back in 1890, and it was never about hiding bad things. It's about the fundamental human right to be left alone, to have a part of your life that's just yours, free from being watched or messed with. It's the right to have a private self.
So let's make this less abstract. Let's try a quick thought experiment. I call it the car insurance test. Imagine you're getting a quote. How comfortable are you sharing how many kilometers you drive? Probably fine, right? Okay, what about how fast you drive? Getting a little more personal. Your complete GPS history, everywhere you go and when? Yikes. Now what about data from your watch on how many hours you sleep? Or your complete health history? See? Somewhere on that list, everybody draws a line. And that line, that's your personal boundary for privacy.
And that's the whole point. Where that line gets drawn, what data is collected, how it's used, how it's protected, that isn't an accident. It's decided by thousands of little choices made by the software engineers building the systems. This is the ethical burden they carry, and it demands a totally different way of thinking, building code with a conscience.
The responsible way to do this, the best practice, is an idea called privacy by design. It's actually a really simple concept. You don't build a massive system that vacuums up data and then try to bolt on some privacy features after you get fined. No. From day one, you start by asking, what's the absolute minimum amount of data we need to make this work? How can we protect it? And how do we give our users control? It's building the privacy in from the very beginning. Now, if you want a perfect example of what happens when ethics are thrown out the window, look no further than the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal. This wasn't a bug, this wasn't an accident. Engineers were specifically told to write code for one purpose: to cheat on emissions tests. The software was smart enough to know when it was being tested in a lab, and it would run clean. But out on the actual road, it was spewing up to 40 times the legal limit of pollutants. The cost was billions of dollars and a complete shattering of public trust.
But the cost of flawed code can be so much worse than money. It can be human lives. Back in the 1980s, a radiation therapy machine called the Therac-25 was responsible for the deaths of at least 6 patients. And it wasn't a mechanical problem, it was a complex software bug, a race condition, that under a very specific set of circumstances would deliver enormous, fatal overdoses of radiation.
And here is the most chilling part of the story. The engineers knew about the potential for this bug. They were aware that this race condition existed, but they made a judgment call. They decided that the sequence of events needed to trigger it was so incredibly unlikely that it wasn't a critical risk. They were wrong. And that raises a terrifying question. Where do you draw the line between an acceptable risk and professional negligence?
So if just avoiding disaster is the bare minimum, what should the real goal be? A really powerful ethical framework to think about is this idea of human flourishing. It asks a simple question: is the technology we're building actually helping people live better lives? Is it contributing to their happiness, their health, their sense of purpose, their relationships? It gives us a positive target to aim for, not just a list of things to avoid. And we can break this big idea down into 3 simple but really profound questions. And honestly, anyone can ask these, whether you're building the software or just using it. First, does this software respect my humanity, or does it just treat me like a data point to be mined? Second, does it bring out the best in people or the worst? And third, and this is the Therac-25 question, if this software fails, what is the real-world impact on other human beings? Because in the end, it all comes down to this. Every digital experience, from your social media feed to a medical device, is the end result of thousands of tiny decisions made by people. The code we write and the technology we choose to use in our lives, it's all shaping our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. And that leaves us with one last big question we all need to think about. Are we making the right choices?